if I may add something, I began working in this field about 40 years ago. When I was in the army, I was a young medical officer, and I was stationed in, let's say, some kind of special forces of the Italian armies called the Carabinieri. I was at the Comando Legione was called in those days, and we had to take care also of radar operators because the Carabinieri, they managed the radars in some remote locations. And we knew then in the early 80s, because I was in the army in 1982-83, that there was this strange syndrome that was first observed in the Soviet Union of those days, then in Sweden, then in Finland, where people were being affected by so-called microwave illness. Nobody knew for sure what it was. So they gave me the task of investigating because they knew that I liked to do research, and so they gave me this task. And so I began working 40 years ago on this microwave illness, as it was called in those days. And it is very interesting to notice that today's 5G uses some frequencies that could be overlapped with those radar frequencies of the past. But this is another topic. So now we know a lot about those old microwave illness. We know a lot about those strange syndromes that have affected US diplomats in Cuba and other embassies, and even in Washington, D.C. Now we know a lot. Probably we have solved the mystery. I don't know if this is public or not, but again, this could be a topic for another talk. So what I'm saying is that I've been fascinated with this field for 40 years, but it was only recently that I also realized that the target weren't the human cells. The targets of the EMFs are the microbial cells. And going back for just a few seconds to human cells, if I may share this article that I published together with my colleagues at the University of Florence in 2002, actually also human cells are affected by EMFs. Now, in those days, we had these GSM cellular phones. So if you remember what cell phones we had in 2002 were rather archaic in comparison to what we have today. Nevertheless, what we did was very simple, and we published this in a specialized journal that was called Oncology Research. So essentially, if you take a Petri dish and you take skin fibroblasts, cells of the skin. Why the skin? Because the skin, of course, is the first human tissue that the radio frequencies meet in their travel toward our bodies. So you put these human skin cells in a Petri dish. And then we simply took one of those old Nokia telephones of those days, those that, they looked like big bricks. And you had to open them, flip open them. And we kept the phone working. So was not a mock phone call, was a real phone. Somebody in the other room was calling that phone and was talking for about 1 hour. And so then we checked the gene expression, that is how the DNA is modified, not mutated, but modified. So it means some genes are expressed, other genes are inhibited, and we found changes so significant that this article was accepted for publication. So to summarize, electromagnetic fields, those of mobile telecommunication, those that surround us, and as you said, we cannot avoid unless we live in a Faraday cage, which is, of course, is unrealistic. Or those fields, they do affect our cells. Probably they cause little, if any, harm to our human cells, but they do cause harm to the cells of our microbiome.
Yeah, this is very, very fascinating. And can you go back to the other slide? I was trying to understand what you shared with us. Are just the other one underneath that?
Sure.
I think. When you say the gut myoelectrical activity, is it that
our gut moves? Otherwise, we would not have digestion. So our stomach moves, our gut moves. And this movement is due to the muscles that are in the gut. Now, the muscles, they receive input from the nerves. That's why when we are anxious, the movements of the gut, of the bowel, are different than when we are resting. So essentially, the electrical impulse coming from the brain, but also from the periphery, influences gut movements. So the myoelectrical activity means those electrical signals that arrive to the muscles of the gut. Okay. Now, every time you have an electrical charge moving, you also have an associated electromagnetic field. Now, this is what the gut myoelectrical activity is means. And this article shows that such weak EMFs are sufficient to induce a response in the cells of the microbiome, the Escherichia coli in this case, but also in colon carcinoma cells. But this, it's a different story. So this is to say how sensitive the microbes of the gut they are. Now, since the microbes, they reside and they live in the gut, we can assume that they have become tolerant to those endogenous natural electromagnetic fields. But most likely they're not very tolerant to the exogenous artificial fields that every moment of the day target these cells, these microbial cells. Okay, thank you so much, and bye-bye then.
Bye-bye.